Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Innistrad Midnight Hunt has brought eternal nightfall to the plane, but we covered all of that in another video. Today, we're looking at the 5 side stories that were published alongside the main one. I am going to assume you are familiar with both the general history of Innistrad and the events that occurred in Midnight Hunt. But if you're not, feel free to hit pause and open the relevant episodes in new tabs or something. Unless that's hard because you're on mobile, in which case you could probably, whatever man. I'm not here to tell you how to watch YouTube. Anyway, we've got 5 side stories for Midnight Hunt, and I'll put the link to them in the description in case you want to read them yourself. We'll start with the first story called Tangles, which features the planeswalker Wrenn. Wrenn is a dryad from an unknown plane first introduced to us in Modern Horizons all the way back in 2019, which honestly feels like way more than 2 years ago, but time is weird, my friends. Which ends up being a theme for this side story, but I am getting ahead of myself. Wrenn is in the Kessig Forest on Innistrad to release her current treefolk companion 6 back into nature. You see, Wrenn bonds with different trees and kind of walks around within them, but respects their wishes when they grow tired of traveling. So she's brought 6 back to Kessig to be replanted, and now she must find a new tree to share her essence with. While she searches, the story jumps over to Teferi, who has arrived on Innistrad, mostly out of curiosity. Apparently he's heard about the plane and wants to learn more about how things work here, so he tags along with a group of Cathars who are heading into the Great Forest in search of a recently seen White Witch. Which turns out to be Wrenn. She explains to Teferi that she is looking for a new tree to replace her previous one, and she cannot planeswalk away until she does. She also tells him that she saved her original glade from a raging fire by containing it within herself, and she must bond with trees strong enough to help her manage it, otherwise it will consume her before much longer. Teferi, being ever helpful, agrees to walk with her while she continues her search, which is guided by a song only she can hear. Eventually they realize they are being followed by a creature with bad intentions, and so Teferi attempts to blast it away with a bit of his temporal magic. Something goes wrong, though, and Teferi and Wrenn become trapped in a sort of time loop. Their path through the forest becomes jumbled, and they feel like they are walking in circles. With her internal fire threatening to consume her, Wrenn asks Teferi if he can feel what's wrong with the spell and fix it. He explains that they have no way to really do that where he's from, and so Wrenn explains how. She's able to use her own nature magic to reveal the composition of the spell, which at this point is behaving a bit more like an enchantment, and Green is actually pretty good at interacting with and undoing enchantments. Teferi studies the threads of his time magic, and he's able to fix the problem, restoring them to the correct path within the forest, just in time for Wrenn to find the tree that she had heard calling to her. That tree was a sapling, but had managed to absorb a portion of Teferi's spell, helping it to rapidly grow, which makes it a perfect host now for Wrenn. She climbs into the tree, becoming Wrenn N7, and says goodbye to Teferi after he realizes she might be able to help him undo the magic that has caused Zhalfir to be lost in time back on Dominaria. That is something that they'll have to explore later, perhaps next year, in Dominaria United. Nicole and I share our thoughts on what else might happen in the Magic story in 2022 in our latest episode of Cards and Coffee, so go check that one out if you haven't already. I also just want to point out here, this story clearly takes place before Midnight Hunt, but it's very odd that Teferi was on Innistrad, then goes back to Ravnica, only to be brought back to Innistrad by Arlinn. But that seems to be what happens. Alright, moving on. Side story number 2 is called Sisters and takes a look at the Dawnheart Coven. Leonore is charged with setting up for the Harvesttide Festival, and she's inspecting the forest around the Celestus along with her sister, Senia, when they find a pile of supplies, but not the people they belong to. Humans have been gathering around the Celestus in preparation for the big festival, but small groups seem to have gone missing, including this one. Sinea digs through the items left behind, and she finds a sinister-looking mask, which Leonor begs her not to play around with. Sinea says she's going to hold on to the mask for now because she doesn't think the owners are coming back for it, and Leonor decides she wants to talk to Catilda, leader of the Dawnheart, to see if she knows anything about the missing people. Leonor finds Catilda, who is in the middle of making necklaces out of teeth. They look human, but she tells everyone they came from werewolves, so it's cool. The gathering crowd of people doesn't really like that answer, though, and they start to get kind of riled up. But then Sinea appears wearing the creepy mask and manages to calm everybody down. It is implied that she might be using some sort of magic to help her do this, and Leonor is now even more freaked out about what's happening at the festival, but everyone else is having a great time. In fact, people start to worship Sinea as she begins making snakes appear, sometimes pulling them right out of people's mouths. This is all too much for Leonor, who decides to follow her sister when she leaves their shared tent late one night. She tracks her sister into the forest and watches her casually stuff the body of a man into a very large egg. Leonor then realizes there's another person behind the egg, and that turns out to be Sereth, the Viper's Fang, one of the legendary creatures from Midnight Hunt. Catilda comes up behind Leonor and aims her staff at Sinea, but Leonor bites her hand before she can make an attack. Catilda explains that the mask has consumed Sinea and there's nothing left of her sister now. She is just a thrall of Sereth. Leonor says she thinks she can still save her sister, so she goes to her, while Catilda starts to battle with Sereth. Suddenly, the ground opens up and a giant demon snake slithers out. Catilda says if the snake eats Sinea while she's wearing the mask, they're all doomed. So Leonor tries to remove the mask, only to find it has become fused to her sister's face. She really digs her nails in and peels it off as Catilda manages to knock Sereth into the giant pit that the demon snake had climbed out of, and then Leonor tosses the mask in there as well, and then the snake retreats back underground, and then the sisters return to the festival along with Catilda. So yeah, it's kind of cool that this one built up the mystery of the mask and then ended with a boss fight that featured one of the set's legendary creatures, but like nothing really came of it. And now she's dead, so I don't know how to feel about it. Anyway, side story number 3 is called His Eyes, All of Them, and it starts out by introducing us to Vadrik on his way to Lambholt to answer their request for help. He arrives at the small town and finds a gathering of citizens along with an inquisitor, or monster hunter, and that's Rem Carolus. The two are not excited to be working together, but they agree to stick it out for the benefit of the townsfolk. They're told people have gone missing lately, and the usual suspects are put forth, werewolves mostly, but then one of the village elders declares it is clearly the work of Old Stickfingers. The discussion is interrupted by another villager announcing yet another murder, and so the investigation moves to the new crime scene, where they find 2 dead humans and 1 dead werewolf, all with holes in them, but no signs of arrows or weapons or anything like that. So Vadrik casts a sort of tracking spell which reveals a path of footprints leading away from the bodies and into the forest. He and Rem follow it. A short while later, they are indeed attacked by Old Stickfingers. Vadrik feels pretty confident in the magical shield he quickly puts up, but the horror barks like a deer and then the shield crumbles. Rem stabs it with his sword and it bleeds white blood, then roars like a pack of 100 dogs. And at this point, I'm not sure the author has ever been around real animals, but we're just going to go with it. The noise has an immediate effect on Vadrik until he casts another spell that neutralizes it, something he apparently learned to do while fighting the Eldrazi. So that was a nice little callback. The 3 continue to fight, with Rem eventually landing a solid hit on Stickfingers, who then vanishes, but they know he's not really defeated. So they return to the village and again talk to the elders and conclude that the creature must have been summoned by someone. Through some more investigating, I will spare you the details, they find that Stickfingers has indeed been summoned to protect a poor farmer's house, but the ritual was interrupted, and so the horror was confused as to who and what he was supposed to protect. Vadrik is able to correct the ritual, and Stickfingers is last seen returning to the forest with a pair of goats given to him in sacrifice, implying that things will be fine for Lambholt from now on. Now, there is something else in this story I want to address, and I need to make it clear I'm coming at this from a place of passion for the magic story. I'm not trying to tear anything down. I just want things to be the best that they can be, so bear that in mind as I explain my criticism here. First of all, Vadrik is gay, and the story handles this very well. His husband is actually from Lambholt, and that's the whole reason he agrees to go there and help them with their monster problem in the first place. It has personal meaning to him. In contrast to that, among the village elders there is an old woman, or crone as she's called in the story. They make a point to tell us that she was actually born a boy, but eventually decided she wanted to be a woman, and the village treated her as one ever since, with no problem. I think I have made my stance on inclusion very clear over the years. Having a diverse range of characters is great for the magic story, but I also hear people when they say sometimes it feels like pandering or forced diversity or whatever. This short story has examples of both good inclusion and, let's say, less than ideal inclusion, right? Vadrik being gay tells us a lot about his motivations and who he is as a character. Removing his internal monologue about that would have a negative impact on the story. Conversely, the crone's history has nothing to do with the story. It never comes up again, nobody treats her differently because of it, it doesn't affect her theory about Stickfingers, nothing. And so, if you think this type of inclusion feels forced, this is one of the few times I might agree with you. Now, to be clear, I still think Wizards of the Coast is making an effort, and I applaud them for that, but this is one spot where they could have handled it a little better. Side story 4 is the Dance of Undeath, which focuses on Lysa, the premier ghoul caller of Innistrad. At the start, she's in Thraben, where the zombie army left behind by Liliana has become hers to control, but now that she's run most of the humans out of the city, she's growing bored. She also has no way to replace her zombies as they continue to fall apart through decay. Lucky for her, both problems are about to be addressed by the approaching Wilhelt, a zombie commanding an army of his own, marching to Thraben under his command. Wilhelt is obsessed with Lysa. He loved her in life, and now that he's a zombie himself, he figures he's got an even better shot at wooing her over. That gets put to the test when he arrives at the gates of the city. It takes Lysa a moment to recognize him as a handsome woodsman that she encountered once in the forest, and she is mildly impressed with his ability to control his own zombies without being a true ghoul caller himself. However, she says, anyone can plant a bush, but it takes a master to shape it into an elephant, which I don't think we've ever actually seen on Innistrad, but I'm not going to argue with her. Lysa then tries to bring Wilhelt under her control, like all the rest of her zombies, but he's able to resist, much to her surprise. He says he came to her as an equal, not a slave. And she says, well, you're going to have to prove that you're an equal then, and she leaves him on the outside of the locked gate. Wilhelt and his army force their way through and encounter Lysa's own zombies. He tries repeatedly to show her how much he loves her and wants to be with her, but she is interested only in adding his minions to her own. Realizing he'll only be destroyed if he stays, Wilhelt flees the city, leaving Lysa alone and bored once again. The whole thing is interspersed with letters being sent from Lysa to her brother Geralf, and at the end she tells him she's done with Thraben and she's coming to stay with him. We might get to hear more about that within Crimson Vow, which will almost certainly give Geralf his own card to match his sister's newest one in Midnight Hunt. The fifth and final side story is about the character I received the most questions about, and that's Lysa. The story is titled The Dusk Reborn. The main character on this one, though, is actually a human woman named Algli. She's had a tough life, which is not unusual on Innistrad. When her family died at the hands of zombies, she prayed to the angels for help, but it never came. Later, when her town was again attacked by a ghoul caller, she fought alongside a man named Oludio. After they defeated the ghoul caller, Oludio said a prayer of thanks to a demon. Some time passes with Algli, Oludio, and another woman they pick up named Sruta, all attempting to summon the Buried Lord, in the desperate hope that he would be able to protect them from the increasingly long and dark nights. Their ritual seems to not work, so Oludio and Sruta start to head back home, while Algli stays behind to mourn the fact that no one can save Innistrad. Suddenly she realizes she's not alone. Sitting on the edge of the forest clearing is Lysa, though she is wounded. The angel explains that she came because she was called for by Algli, but she also warns that the Buried Lord has also been summoned and is now probably snacking on her friends deeper in the forest. Algli offers to bind Lysa's wound and asks where she's been this whole time. The angel says she was dead, so the woman fills her in on all of the details of the travails and everything else she has apparently missed. For anyone who doesn't remember or didn't watch my video on Commander Legends, Lysa is the missing sister to the other great angels of Innistrad, but while they fought against the forces of darkness, she was willing to talk with them. She believed that would help her understand the enemy better and maybe find a way to make peace. Avacyn couldn't stand this idea, and so she destroyed Lysa, who then spent the next 1,000 years as scattered mana. On Innistrad, given enough time, the mana that makes up demons and angels can eventually return to a solid form, which is what happened with Lysa, and just in time too, since the plane needs angels now, maybe more than ever. Anyway, back on her feet and up to speed with all of the horrible stuff happening on the plane, Lysa walks deeper into the forest along with Algli in search of the demon known as the Buried Lord. They find him and manage to kill him, but his body remains. Lysa realizes it's because they are bound together. The ritual that returned her also brought the demon, so as long as she's alive, his body will also contain some amount of power. Algli offers to turn the corpse of the demon into armor for Lysa to wear, because she was a tanner in her happier days and would love nothing more than to serve the angel who has finally come to save the humans once again. And that's pretty much it. This one confirms that Lysa was dead and then came back to life, bound to one of the demons she had consulted with in her previous life. She had no impact on the main story for Midnight Hunt, and I'm not sure what presence she'll have in Crimson Vow, if any. What do you think? Can we expect any of the side stories to affect things going forward? Or are they just self-contained adventures that happen to take place on Innistrad at a point in time similar to the main thread? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.